Ryan Reynolds here from Mint Mobile. I don't know if you knew this, but anyone can get the same premium wireless for $15 a month plan that I've been enjoying. It's not just for celebrities. So do like I did and have one of your assistants switch you to Mint Mobile today. I'm told it's super easy to do at mintmobile.com/switch.
Upfront payment of $45 for 3-month plan, equivalent to $15 per month required. Intro rate first 3 months only, then full price plan options available. Taxes and fees extra. See full terms at mintmobile.com.
Decisions made in Washington can affect your portfolio every day. But what policy changes should investors be watching? Washington Wise is an original podcast from Charles Schwab that unpacks the stories making news in Washington right now and how they may affect your finances and portfolio. Listen at schwab.com/WashingtonWise. So, Stephanie, we're a couple of months into Trump 2.0, and I'm wondering if you had to sum up Trump's economy in like a word or a phrase, what would it be?
So awesome.
I called up Stephanie Ruhle over at MSNBC because I needed a friend to tell me exactly what Trump is doing with the economy. Also because I needed a laugh first thing in the morning. I sense some sarcasm there.
Oh, my goodness. Sorry. Self-inflicted chaos.
Trump's approach has been described as economic shock therapy. New York Magazine said the president is trying to design his own recession. These are not turns of phrase most presidents want associated with them. But we're dealing with Donald Trump here. Before working as a journalist, Stephanie spent years working in finance. She says one of the stranger things about this moment is calling up her sources in the business community and realizing how surprised they are. Because back in November, many of them saw Trump 2.0 as an opportunity.
When President Trump won, they embraced it. And they thought, all right, giddy up. Donald Trump has always made it very clear he's all about business, big business. And in the last administration, he was laser beam focused on the stock market. He would walk into the dining room at Mar-a-Lago or at 21 Club and say, you're welcome. Look at the stock market. And so businesses were excited.
For these folks, President Trump at least promised a change.
A lot of people in sort of the big business community did not feel connected or supported by Joe Biden. They felt like he was negative when he talked about corporate America. They felt like he didn't reach out to them very often.
We talked about regulating them a lot more.
Yes, yeah, absolutely. And if you talk to almost anybody in the Fortune 500 community, they did not like Lena Khan from the FTC. They felt like she was so academic. She was so focused on hyper-regulation in their point. She broke what one would call animal spirits, right? The ability to grow and develop and merge.
Oh, the animal spirits? Is that like a thing among CEOs?
Yes, that's a term that you hear in the business community, right? Like that's when things can rev up and they can do more. And so animal spirits were unleashed, when Trump won. And think about this, right? You have a president who's saying, I'm going to deregulate everything. Right. So if you run any sort of business, imagine you could run your business with no rules. Right. In the short term, you love that idea. Right. It's like my teenagers thinking they can have an unlimited allowance and their parents are never home. Amazing. Until all the furniture ends up in the pool in the backyard and they forget to go to the grocery store and they're screwed. They thought we were going to have like absolute no rules. So he was going to extend corporate tax cuts for them. Yay! There'd be no regulation. Woohoo! And then he won.
Trump's victory ushered in a brutal back and forth on tariffs, funding freezes, and mass layoffs. And all that means economic indicators are wobbling. Last week, the S&P 500 index fell into a so-called correction, that is 10% below the most recent high. I'm feeling like CEO's animal spirit may not have materialized, but Trump's animal spirit sure has.
It sure has, because his goal is to be the ultimate king.
Today on the show, how Trump's animal spirit economy is going to work. Or not. I'm Mary Harris. You're listening to What Next? Stick around.
This episode is brought to you by Progressive Insurance. Do you ever find yourself playing the budgeting game? Well, with the Name Your Price tool from Progressive, you can find options that fit your budget and potentially lower your bills. Try it at Progressive.com. Progressive Casualty Insurance Company and Affiliates. Price and coverage match limited by state law. Not available in all states.
You come to the New Yorker Radio Hour for conversations that go deeper with people you really want to hear from, whether it's Bruce Springsteen or Questlove or Olivia Rodrigo, Liz Cheney, or the godfather of artificial intelligence, Jeffrey Hinton, or some of my extraordinarily well-informed colleagues at the New Yorker. So join us every week on the New Yorker Radio Hour, wherever you listen to podcasts.
The mainstream view from Wall Street economists, Fed officials, is that Trump inherited an economy that was in good shape. Like GDP last year was almost 3%. Job growth was good. Unemployment was low. It may not have been like 100% rosy, but it was pretty tight. Yeah?
It was very good. And if Trump had just kept his hands on the wheel, 10-2, and continued to coast, he would have smooth sailing over the next 4 years. And the truth is, and this is not a knock on President Biden, Trump is a much better salesman, boaster, showman. He would have sold the hell out of Biden's economy that he inherited, and people would have been really happy. Inflation was obviously a problem, but it had been improving. And now, of course, don't get me started on egg prices. It's only gotten worse there, and it will in lots of other areas. And the sad thing is, Mary, you and I could agree, the economy's been really bad for decades and decades for people who are part of the industrial economy, people who are in manufacturing, right? When globalization took hold, it was great for China. It was great for other parts of the world, and it was great for consumers because we started getting cheap stuff really quickly. But if you did anything in manufacturing in this country, it was brutal, right? 50, 60 years ago, manufacturing was almost 50% of our GDP. Now it's less than 10%. And so while I actually applaud the spirit of what Donald Trump wants to do, bring back manufacturing to this country, the problem is it's not actually going to happen in a significant way. Because think about, Mary, the 1-2 punch that would need to happen right now. Donald Trump would have to say, I'm imposing these tariffs. We are going to start making everything here. And that's what's going to happen. Great.
But then, where's the manufacturing? Where's the steel coming from?
Correct.
Where's all the infrastructure that will make that happen?
But at this point, manufacturing is so complicated. Think about how cars are made, right? They move across the border 7 times between the U.S. and Mexico before they're done. And what we also haven't seen is a single CEO standing up and saying, I'm building factories in these 15 cities across the country, and we're going to bring manufacturing back. No. But what we also know is during the Biden administration, the infrastructure law was creating many jobs, right? Lots of clean energy jobs were being created, and now a lot of that is hanging in the balance. So it's unfortunate because people have no idea that that's not actually the truth. The backside of these tariffs, there's not this giant manufacturing game plan that you're going to see overnight. It's going to take years and years, if that at all. So when you hear the Treasury Secretary or others say, well, we're experiencing short-term pain because long-term gain will come, the question is what? When?
Can we talk about the tariffs? Because day one, Donald Trump comes into office. Hours later, he's like, okay, we're going to do the 25% tariffs on imports from Canada and Mexico starting in February. And obviously, for the last 2 months, we've seen this whipsawing back and forth. Tariffs are on, tariffs are off, tariffs are on, tariffs are off. Now we have some tariffs, not others. It seems like April 1st is another looming deadline here with the EU possibly having tariffs, us possibly having tariffs against them. Let's take seriously the idea that tariffs could be good for the economy, or at least just like what is the theory of the case? The theory of the case is we'll bring manufacturing, but then also Donald Trump was saying if we have tariffs, it's going to somehow stop fentanyl. Does the theory of the case make sense here? Is there even one theory?
Here's where it doesn't make sense, and let's start with fentanyl. The amount of fentanyl that's crossing the border with Canada is de minimis. And if he might say, listen, even if it costs one life, that life matters, it's just not being genuine or honest. And what's the most galling is when he first imposed the tariffs on China, almost immediately he created a carve-out for smaller packages that are less than $800. And at first people were like, yeah, that's because everyone was freaking out that they weren't going to get their Shein or their Temu packages. But that's actually the ultimate carve-out for fentanyl because it's those packages where you would see fentanyl cross into the United States, and now they have a carve-out. So that's what's so distressing. If you actually were going to take that on, well, then why would you have created that exemption? So that's number one. Number two, the theory of we're going to impose these tariffs. So places like China, where they manufacture super, super cheap and they're gutting our manufacturing here. Let's do that. But if we were to do that, then the answer would be, let's do this in a coordinated way with our allies, which is something that they were working on during the Obama administration with TPP, the Trans-Pacific Partnership.
Well, it's so interesting because I interviewed an economic reporter way before Trump actually was elected, who's basically like proposing there was a sort of Trump-Biden synergy about the economy. There was like a shared economic theory which involved tariffs with China. And it's true. It seemed like that there was, except then once Trump retook office, he just went ham with the tariffs.
Correct, because he's like, I don't want to work with anyone else. And that's why it really doesn't make sense to be imposing these tariffs on our European allies and on Canada and Mexico, where if we were to work together in a coordinated fashion, then potentially we could go after those bad actors. Now, I would say there is a chance that come April 1st, April 2nd, maybe European countries blink, right? Trade wars kill everyone. And they've got a trade surplus in Europe. And there's a chance, and this is what some of the president's allies would argue, there's a chance that come early April, we see our European partners lower their tariffs, meet us where we are. That could happen. Or the market goes down again. Trump feels more and more pressure. People like a Scott Bessent or a Howard Lutnick are freaking out because it's bad for the economy. It's bad for markets. It's certainly bad for their reputations. And I could see Trump basically BSing us and saying, well, fentanyl numbers are way down. Border numbers are way down. I don't need to impose the tariffs. I won. And then he tears it up. But that's also a long shot.
Yeah, and like the cause and effect, it's like those things may not be related in the way he's conveying.
Yes, and that's why you're seeing business people, even those who supported him, kind of pulling their hair out right now, just saying like, come on, like, let's just have a game plan and go with it.
Another major Trump policy that is impacting the economy for sure is this de-investment in government, cutting jobs, cutting spending, doing things like threatening universities with pulling their funding. How is this rippling outwards, and how is this impacting the people you're talking to?
Okay, so this is what I'm most obsessed with. And I'm not most obsessed with it because like, oh, boohoo, universities are going to have their funding cuts, and, and they're thinking about a woke professor in a tweed jacket losing his tenure. And that's not it. Universities in some states, think about where colleges are, right? In lots of parts of the country, they're the only thing in that city. In Alabama, University of Alabama is the largest employer in the entire state. And there's many universities that are obviously tied to research facilities. They're also tied to public hospitals and medical systems. Think about a place like Rochester, New York. okay? University of Rochester is responsible for 40,000 jobs. If suddenly they're cutting 10,000 jobs, right? If State College, Pennsylvania, where Penn State is cutting thousands and thousands of jobs, there aren't other jobs in those regions to be had. And if you don't believe me, look what Moody's did, right? The two big rating agencies, S&P and Moody's. Yesterday, Moody's took their outlook for universities from stable to negative.
Have we had that before? Where universities have been in the negative?
No. And Moody's said this is in direct response to the cuts that have taken place because of DOGE. And we're actually seeing, right? You see Katie Britt, you see other Republicans.
The senator.
Yeah, the senator urging DOGE, do not do this, because they know how much their states are going to absolutely suffer. And you are going to see regional economies crater around this.
So here's the thing. If I take these two big changes that are happening right now, the government cuts and the threats of tariffs, on their face, and take their goals on their face, and think about what it would mean for these to be fully implemented for our economy, I gotta say it's weird, because when I look at it, it seems like you want to reorient the economy to be a lot more about manufacturing and manual labor, potentially, and less about education. And that seems to roll us backwards. I mean, I know the whole theme has been Make America Great Again, making things go backwards has been the goal. But I'm not sure this is what folks took from that or meant when they said it aloud.
Mary, it's especially galling because when you think about Elon Musk and the DOGE team, they've benefited from the greatest education system in the world. Part of American exceptionalism is higher education here.
And a ton of government contracts.
Oh, yes, of course. But we have top universities. It's why the smartest kids in the world want to go to college here. And so the impact of this is so crushing. And we can both agree, most of the country can. The idea, the spirit of DOGE is great, right? Everybody feels like the government's bloated, there's too much fat in the system. Everybody would agree with that. And so if they wanted to actually implement DOGE, the way to do it, and this is certainly not an endorsement in any way of McKinsey consultants, but would to come in with a McKinsey type approach, right? Look at every agency, right? I bet the president, if he called upon medical experts and business experts, experts in all the different verticals. If he said, I'm creating a task force, a SWAT team of the best in their fields in these areas, and he brought them in and spent months looking at every agency, every department, and said, where can we make improvements?
But I can hear the pushback to this now. I can hear Trump saying, that'll take forever. We don't have the time. We got to rush it through right now. Break everything immediately.
But Mary, imagine if we actually did that, because I have found it's funny, over the last 10 years, I've thought about it a ton, thinking Elon Musk, Mark Zuckerberg, Jeff Bezos have become the richest people on the planet. What if a president called upon them to say, let's actually implement American exceptionalism, Tim Cook, come into the White House. Let's create a partnership. Help us update our systems so our DMV doesn't operate like our DMV. But instead, we're not seeing that partnership. We're not seeing those plans. And I'm not dogging on the age of the people who work in DOGE. I'm dogging on their lack of expertise. So instead of coming in and looking at NOAA and saying, how do we improve this? They're simply saying, let's cut 1 in every 4 jobs. And the people who are making those cuts have no understanding of the underlying work. That's the issue I have.
We'll be back after a quick break.
Still getting around to that fix on your car? You got this. On eBay, you'll find millions of parts guaranteed to fit. Doesn't matter if it's a major engine repair or your first time swapping your windshield wipers. eBay has that part you need, ready to click perfectly into place for changes big and small. Loud or quiet, find all the parts you need at prices you'll love. Guaranteed to fit every time. But you already know that. eBay. Things, people, love. Eligible items only. Exclusions apply.
Capitalism moves mountains, sometimes literally. It shapes our lives in so many ways. But more and more people are asking, is capitalism the solution or the problem? I'm John Biewen, host of Scene on Radio, the Peabody-nominated podcast that asks big questions about who we are really. Listen to our Season 7, Capitalism, available now wherever you listen. That's SCENE on radio.
Hi, this is Dahlia Lithwick, host of Slate's legal podcast, Amicus. On our latest episode, Kate Shaw says Elon Musk, Doge, and the Trump administration are trying, as a legal matter, to have it both ways. I like to call it Schrodinger's Doge.
They are relishing saying one thing in the courts of law and another thing in the court of public opinion, and essentially daring the legal system to call them on it.
How do judges and the legal system handle conflicting statements by a president in and outside of the courtroom? Listen to new episodes of Amicus with me, Dahlia Lithwick, every week. Search AMICUS wherever you get your podcasts.
So you said at the top how you thought basically what's happening right now is economic chaos. And I want to talk about what that's going to mean for the people who listen to this show. Because I think the big thing people think of when they think of chaos and the implications for them, they think of a recession, which is one potential impact here and certainly one people are worried about. If you look in your crystal ball for a second, are your lights blinking recession right now?
They're not blinking recession, but the concern is real. We haven't even talked about if we're faced with mass deportations, what it does to our labor force, right? Any business leader will tell you we absolutely need comprehensive immigration reform, but mass deportations aren't the answer. And I will give you this fun fact where I think the mass deportations are a bit of a hustle. I was speaking to Art Cullen, who is a very famous journalist in Storm Lake, Iowa. And Iowa has a huge amount of meat processing plants. It's why they have such a big immigrant community. And I asked him, so what are the deportations looking like? And he said, what deportations? Iowa, obviously a super red Republican state, so the president doesn't want to get off sides with them. And he said to me, listen, if they wanted to beef their numbers up in terms of mass deportations, they would show up at meat processing plants, but they haven't, not at Tyson or anywhere else. So it kind of shows you the hustle in terms of, we've seen Kristi Noem in all of her raid gear with her hat on and her vest on, ready to go. And she's going to blue cities and putting on this big deportation show. But if they actually wanted to implement these mass deportations, they would go to those red states and they would go to meat processing plants, but they're not going to because they know how terrible that would be for those big businesses and those communities that support Republicans in office.
So what you're saying here is actually more disturbing to me because it gets to this thing that I fear when I look at what's happening right now, which is that, yes, we might be driving ourselves pretty close to the cliff of a recession, but in some ways, that might be beneficial for a leader like Donald Trump, who might swoop in and see parts of the economy beginning to falter and decide, I'm going to lend a hand because that's what the government does, the federal government, when there's a recession. But I'm going to lend a hand only to the people I like, only to the industries that support me.
Bingo.
Yeah, it's terrifying.
That has the effect, wait for it, of Russia. And that's why there are some business leaders that continue to cozy up to Trump. You've read the Wired reporting about dinners at Mar-a-Lago, candlelit dinners, $1 million to reserve your seat. A private meeting with the president, $5 million, right? He's been flanked by crypto CEOs for weeks. You can buy your way in. And that's a short-term win for some individual business leaders for some specific industries, but it's long-term devastating for our economy. Yes, Russia is filled with some of the richest oligarchs in the world and has had a terrible, cruel economy, crumbling economy for decades, and Russian people who have suffered. And so, yeah, we could end up there. And the other thing, when you talk about the president swooping in, here's the other thing: swooping in and privatizing. And wouldn't they love to privatize the Postal Service, Amtrak, potentially Social Security? And government is not supposed to run like a business. Business is there to maximize profitability. That's the point of business. Government is something different, Mary. Government is there to ensure that people are physically safe, socially free, and financially secure.
Take me back to those conversations that I know you're having with CEOs and people in the business community, because you said how they were kind of happy when Trump got elected.
Yeah.
Where are they now, and why am I not hearing more from them?
They are frustrated and they are silent. Think about this. Last week was the Business Roundtable meeting in Washington, D.C., and President Trump came and spoke at it. The idea behind the BRT is business leaders meet with government leaders. They talk about their issues, their challenges, what they need to grow. It's supposed to be this sort of open forum where they do that. They all showed up. Trump got on the stage. The current head of the BRT, who's the CEO of Cisco, Chuck Robbins, interviewed him. And while that entire room, almost everybody in the room, is completely worried, every CEO out there has a tariff war room at their headquarters, and they are trying to figure out which end is up and what do they do. Not one person in that room pressed him. Nobody even asked him a hard question. Nobody raised a single concern because they know that he will seek revenge. He's made it clear.
Stephanie, I thought we were seeing the rise of masculine energy. Where's that masculine energy at?
Sister, please. We have more masculine energy than any of those boys. Some are going, pulling a quote unquote full Zuckerberg, Mark Zuckerberg, who, listen, after his $25 million settlement that he had with Trump, because Trump sued him because Zuckerberg took him off his platforms after January 6th, after that settlement, after a big donation to the campaign, miraculously, it seems like the legal woes and investigations that Facebook were undergoing have disappeared. So you've got some CEOs who are saying cozying up to Trump is going to help pave a clear path for me, make my troubles go away.
They're basically saying I can pay to play.
Correct. And for others, they're just saying, I need to keep my head down, my mouth shut, brace myself, and figure out how I'm going to survive the next 4 years.
Stephanie, I'm so grateful for your time and insights. This was great. Thanks for coming on the show.
Oh my gosh, thanks for having me, Mary.
Stephanie Ruhle is an NBC business analyst, and she also hosts The 11th Hour with Stephanie Ruhle. It comes on late, 11 p.m., every weeknight. And that's the show. What Next is produced by Paige Osburn, Elena Schwartz, Rob Gunther, Anna Phillips, Madeline Ducharme, and Ethan Oberman. Ben Richmond is the Senior Director of Podcast Operations here at Slate, and I'm Mary Harris. Go track me down on Blue Sky. I'm at Mary Harris. Thanks for listening. I'll catch you back here next time.